Hi, I'm Gareth Kane, and welcome to the Net Zero Business Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Hattie Park, Sustainability Manager at the All England Lawn Tennis Club, which most people know simply as Wimbledon, the world's preeminent tennis tournament. Welcome to the podcast, Hattie.
Thank you, Gareth. It's really good to be here and to see you again.
The pleasure is all mine. Now, first question we ask all our guests to sort of get so that our listeners can get to know them is how did you first get started in sustainability?
So, how I think my interest in environment goes back a long way. I actually, I've always loved sort of landscapes and the environment. And actually, my original undergraduate degree, I wrote my dissertation on environmentalism. It was really very long time ago now. So we weren't necessarily talking about climate change, but environmentalism was a thing. So I did that. But in terms of getting into this role properly, I was working in a kind of small brand consultancy, and I was really feeling that we were being kind of environmentally, there were opportunities for us to do nice better things in a more environmentally sustainable way. And I thought, well, this is something that I care about, I'm interested in. I had a few conversations with people and then signed up actually to do a master's at Imperial College as a course called Environmental Technology. I did that in 2006, 7. And then it was a question of getting, and that kind of taught me the language, but obviously you have to then get into an organization. But it did sort of steer me more towards the kind of, the influence that a corporate can have, how you could hopefully steer a corporate strategy to do good things. And it was quite hard getting back out there. I thought, well, I've done this master's and I've got a distinction, and so anyone should employ me. And actually, even back then, it was, well, we'll take an intern if you speak 3 languages and can work for nothing. So it really did come down to leveraging contacts, having meetings with people, kind of, and in the end, I went back to an investment bank that I'd worked in and had a really good but short immersion in kind of establishing a sustainability strategy, because that was what the bank was doing. So they had employed a very senior person, a lady called Charlotte Grazo out of Vodafone. She was setting this up for the bank, and I was in her team. So it was a really good learning experience. The bank didn't last very long. It was the financial crisis.
Mhm.
I then had another few months out in the wilderness, I suppose, applying for jobs. Really helpful. Just, I would say, applying for jobs is a really helpful way of trying to crystallize what what your experience is. Even if you're a sort of round peg in a square hole, it's still kind of helpful. The job came up for the BBC actually as a project manager, environmental sustainability project manager at the BBC, and I read the description and read the attributes, and I thought I can do those things, and they're talking about me, and went through the interview process and actually got the job there. And so that job was in a team called BBC Outreach, and it was kind of it involved, over the time I was there, which was about 8.5, 9 years, a couple of iterations of the strategy, reporting and evolving the strategy from kind of the direct impacts to more of the influence. Before I went into the BBC as well, I did a short-term project for an NHS trust doing their Mayor of London green accreditation. That was really helpful, sort of grounding in, actions that you can take, how you can talk about it, understanding how to sort of prepare documentation to just apply for the scheme. So that was helpful to get me into the BBC. Had a wonderful time at the BBC for many years. Worked with you there
Yeah.
on a project back in the day, and left about in 2018 and kind of worked my way into Wimbledon. I was kind of aware that it was an organisation that very much, it's takes its responsibilities very seriously, and there was a real opportunity to come in here and set something up. So joined Wimbledon in the beginning of 2019, and so what my job here is to kind of well, what I've done here, I suppose, is establish a framework for us all to work to, which is ultimately with the ultimate goal of trying to have a positive impact on the environment. And so, establishing what things are we going to focus on, and then engaging all of the amazing colleagues around here. So, and I've been here for 7 years now.
Right.
I sort of forget, quite
Yeah.
quite long in the tooth. Still doing the emissions reporting, but what's so wonderful about working here is you kind of get involved in everything because you're kind of, well, what should our strategic approach be? What does the data tell us? How can we work with our official partners? How can we, promote this kind of environment positive ethos to our guests? So it's been a journey of over many years, I suppose.
Yeah. And just going back to the BBC,
Hmm.
obviously that's where I got to know you and some of the other
Yeah.
members of the BBC team. And what always impressed me is you did more than just the BBC, with the Albert program,
Yes.
etc. You sort of extended sustainability out across the broadcasting
Yeah.
in sector. So, do you have any reflections on that about?
Well, I mean, I think you've had my colleague Richard Smith on the
Yeah.
podcast. He built the carbon calculator at the time. Yeah. I mean, that what was really good in that team was the opportunity we had as the publicly funded broadcaster for the UK to kind of start something up and then share it with the rest of the industry, which we did, and now the sort of BAFTA Albert scheme has taken on a real life of its own. And actually, what's been very nice for me here at Wimbledon is that we are a host broadcaster. So Wimbledon Broadcast Services is a participant in the BAFTA Albert Sports production scheme as well. So I sort of came full circle and said, why don't we get in touch with BAFTA? They can be the kind of Switzerland for the broadcast sector. And
Yeah.
now coming to Wimbledon, signing us up into the BAFTA scheme here.
You can't get away from it. You've created it. Yeah. Just before we started, I had a quick look at the Wimbledon targets.
Mhm.
Net zero by 2030,
Yeah,
net gain biodiversity by 2030. Those are
yeah,
extremely ambitious targets. How
yeah.
did you
So
get to set them?
yeah, well, so our net zero, we've got two net zero targets. So the 2030 target is for our operational emissions, i.e., around our main site.
Mm.
We are a signatory to something called the UN Sport for Climate Action Framework, which multiple sports organisations participate in. And as part of that, we entered a few years ago something called the Race to Zero, which was, COP aligned. And as part of our commitment via that framework, we have a wider net zero emissions target for 2040, which brings in the supply chain, because actually our own operational emissions, as you'll be well aware, will be much more dwarfed by the emissions in the supply chain. So we set our net zero operations target in 2019, purely because I arrived in 2019. It was very good timing. The UK had set the 2050 net zero target, and so we were looking to make a commitment to demonstrate we're committed to this. And 2030, at that time, 2030 seemed a good amount of time away in the future, but also was very much tied in with our anticipated plans for regeneration of the Wimbledon Park site across the road. And as part of that, we've got lots of plans for, well, a decarbonised site. So, ground source heat pumps and things like that in that site, which we would then connect to the main grounds.
Obviously, you set that target in 2019, but you
Yes.
said it seemed that far enough away.
Yeah.
But now we're in
Oh, yeah.
2026.
Yeah.
Um, how likely are you? Do you feel you're on course to hit it?
Well, yeah, so there have been some delays in terms of being able to implement some of the decarbonised infrastructure. But we have made really good progress in terms of, for us as well, what it really means is eliminating our Scope 1 emissions. So, and for us, the big source of that will be gas. We use gas for heating, cooking, and hot water. And our emissions and consumption of gas has reduced by 35% since 2019. So that is really good progress. There is, of course, more to do, and the while we're still going through the legal processes on the golf course, that means that there are some big bits of gas infrastructure that are sort of on hold until we can go ahead. But we are looking at alternatives, ways we might get around that. Our electricity consumption, we buy renewable electricity, but our consumption is down 24%, emissions down 48%, but that thanks to the decarbonisation of the grid. So it's, so we are making really good progress with a, one or two delays on it, and our commitment remains the same, and our ambition remains the same. And what is really great about working here is that, the board are behind it, the finance director is behind it, our estates director is behind it. We're looking at various projects to regenerate the estate we have here. And, it's how can these projects not only be as climate resilient as possible, but be completely free of fossil fuels. So we already have two buildings that are fossil fuel free, which is something that I think we should be really proud of, and sort of demonstrating that we're putting our money where our mouth is on this. And there are certain things that are slightly beyond our control at the moment, but where we've got kind of standalone buildings that we can invest in and electrify, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And the net gain in biodiversity, is that just
Yeah.
on the Wimbledon site, or is
So
it supply chain?
it's across all of our land holdings.
Yeah.
So and this is about getting a really good baseline. So we have got very, very good baseline data for our Wimbledon Park, for the golf course land across the road. We are very confident that we will unlock a way over 10% biodiversity net gain on that project as and when we are able to proceed. We've got some good baseline data for the main site. We've made amazing ecological improvements at our community tennis centre in Rains Park. So we're kind of still in the process of getting our baseline data in a format that's easily communicatable and understandable. And I've actually not seen that many clear examples of a biodiversity baseline that you can communicate in a way that, we want to have information that people who engage with Wimbledon can kind of understand, and linear units and riparian units aren't that tangible.
Yeah.
We're also kind of, I think the really big opportunity that we have here is around that sort of nature engagement as well. So there's, we present tennis in an English garden. There's so much that we do here, around the site. The aim is around this sort of mosaic of different sorts of healthy habitats. So we've got living walls, green roofs, brown roofs, wildflowers. The aim is also how can we bring this kind of English garden experience to life for guests who come to the site.
Yes, and I saw that Wimbledon's the only Grand Slam event played on natural grass.
Yes, yeah,
So,
I know. So, and that's what makes it so special as well. So that, using a living surface, competing in an English garden, and then hopefully in future competing in a kind of English parkland setting, is a kind of real USP of us. And I think in terms of nature is a very, nature and climate are so closely interlinked. So to sort of combine the two in one sort of wonderful green tennis package is a lovely thing to be able to do.
Yeah. And then the 2040 target, including the supply chain.
Yeah.
My immediate question is how much of that is strawberries?
Well, the emissions from the strawberries aren't that much, actually, you know. So, I mean, as you know, with food,
Yeah,
it's often it's the higher emissions foods are more like the beef, lamb, dairy,
yeah,
those sorts of things. The fruit and vegetables aren't so significant, but we work. Um, our food and drink partner is a brilliant company called Levy. They work with a company called Food Steps, who provide an emissions inventory for the food and drink we see, so we can sort of see it broken down by and it's significant, you know, don't get me wrong, because we are, you know, probably the single biggest catered event in Europe, over 14 days for 500,000 people.
yeah.
So there's a lot there, but not strawberries, not so much. And you know, what we do is on our menus we show the carbon weighting of the food that we
Mm,
serve, so you can see um, on a scale of A, which is low, to E,
mm,
high, the emissions of the food you're going to be served or you might want to buy. And our aim is to sort of shift more of the dishes, you know, lower down that carbon scale. So that we definitely don't want to guilt our guests into you must only eat A's and B's.
yeah,
It's not about that at all. It's just about providing that information so that people can, you know, hopefully find it quite interesting. I think it's interesting to sort of try and to see, well, why is that dish a D and that's a B? And so you learn something,
mm,
you make a more informed choice, and it's also really useful for our chefs when they're planning the recipes. And that's how we hope to kind of transition more of those dishes lower down the scale.
yeah,
But the other component parts of our scope 3 emissions will be kind of retail stock, technology. You know, there's a lot more in it.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned the 500,000 visitors over a fortnight. That must be one of the big challenges
Yeah. So
because
I think that's something that is common to all sort of international sporting events is the spectator travel. And of course, you know, the fans are the lifeblood of the event. Wimbledon without guests. I think we all saw during COVID a sporting event without fans is just not the same. And there are so many sort of benefits to participating in a live sporting event from your sort of you know, the sort of social cohesion that comes with it. So you know, it has such a wonderful broader benefit. But yes, so the fan travel again is an order of magnitude of probably bigger. And one of the requirements under the Sport for Climate Action Framework is to, you know, understand what this is and engage with the fans on this subject,
yeah,
which we try to do by, so we have we have this environment positive champion campaign, be an environment positive champion. We have a journey planner that you then can work out how you get to the championships, and it will give you the lower carbon options. It will sort of prioritize the lower carbon options so people can make sort of better choices about how they get here. So that's the sort of first thing. We have a page on the website, you know, be an environment positive champion. Here are things that you can do. So again, trying to engage with the fans and spectators. We call them guests, so engage with our guests on the subject. So when you come to Wimbledon, first of all, you've had your, you know, use the journey planner to work out how to get here in the most environmentally friendly way you can. When you're here, you know, you'll number one, nature is all around. Then if you're eating something, you can see the carbon weighting. So really trying to engage all the way as well, which is really important.
but that density of people, 500,000 over a weekend, do you have to put on extra public transport, or is it
So we
just
have shuttle
decline and
buses.
the bus
Yeah, no,
stops?
we have shuttle buses up from the station. So
Yeah,
there are kind of two main access points, and the majority of people do arrive on public transport, which is great. It's been an interesting trend over the past years, in that fewer people are driving, just because it's a day out, it's an event, and actually, so do you really want to be getting into your car at the end of the day? Maybe not. So the majority arrive on public transport. There's a London Underground station, a sort of 15-minute walk away, called Southfields. Probably most come from there. Wimbledon Railway mainline station has London Underground and mainline rail. We have shuttle buses running to and fro there, and each year there are more electric buses in that fleet
Yeah.
as well. Cycling has been, actually the e-bike rentals has been a really fast growing way of getting here. So, which is, wonderful to see. And so
Yeah.
we've kind of allocated a large amount of space for those to be dropped off.
Yeah. And do Transport for London put on extra services or anything during the fortnight?
I don't, they don't put on extra tubes on the network, as far as I know. They may do, but we have really, we have a hotline almost to TfL in terms of, when our anticipated flows are going to be, with more people coming in and out, and we work really closely with them. I don't think there are special trains coming to Wimbledon Station, but the bus service is something that is put on especially for the championships.
Brilliant. And then once people are on site, how
Hmm.
much you've mentioned the carbon rate rankings on the
Yeah.
menus, but are there other measures you carry out to try and sort of influence behavior on waste and issues like
Well,
that?
so obviously we do, one of the things we really want to do is promote a culture of reuse.
Yeah.
So all of your drinks cups are in, this is much more normal now in most events, you'll have reusable cups for drinks.
Mm.
So in my first year, they were single-use disposable cups. Then we managed to do the reusables. The following championships, we had a COVID year when we didn't do it, but
Mm.
that is very much about kind of promote, single use anything is not such a good idea.
Yeah.
And or it's a really nice way. We have a £1 deposit on the cups, because the aim is we want these cups back. We
Mm.
want them to be used again and again, year after year. And they do come back to us. But there's a £1 deposit on them, and you can redeem your deposit at the bar, or you can donate your £1 deposit by putting the cup in a special return point,
Mm.
and that £1 goes to the Wimbledon Foundation, which benefits lots of, it's amazing sort of grant giving organisation, which benefits lots of local charities in Merton and Wandsworth. So and I think it was about £130,000 came to the Wimbledon Foundation because of the reusable cup thing. And the
Wow.
players have reusable bottles as well, which was that was a really positive step forward as well. In 2023, I think,
Mm.
was the first year we did that. And, to have the players kind of role modeling reuse, refill. There are dispensers on the outside court, so you could actually see the player that you're following around the world or something. You can see them actually refilling their bottle.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you go on to the players. I was just watching before we started the video. I assume it was taken last year of the quiz. You
yes.
have several players.
Yeah.
Can you give us the background to that?
Well, this is for sports events. It's kind of the holy grail to get your athletes involved in showing that they care about the environment. And I think at some point we on our agenda to talk about today were some of the challenges. So I may be jumping up, but
Yeah.
actually this is, again, I think, a challenge common to many of us in sport and sustainability, is how can we get the players engaged? Because your average Wimbledon fan doesn't really mind what the sustainability manager says, but they are interested in Arina Sabalenka or Iga Swiatek or Yannick Sinner.
Yeah.
So how can we involve them? And it's difficult to do, because partly our relationship with the players is quite transitory. They come, they compete, they leave.
Mm.
So it's often actually the tours that put on events through the year can sort of develop those deeper relationships with them. Um, but they also are very conscious that they are traveling a lot. You know, part of the nature of being an international athlete is traveling around the planet. And sometimes, you know, the world of social media is not very kind when somebody comes out there with the best intentions to say, this is something I'm worried about, this is something I care about.
Yeah.
There is the risk of, well, stop traveling then. And of course, you can't stop traveling. It's your job. People do have to travel for their jobs. So there's a bit of sort of unkindness. So what can we do to try and create a safe environment for people to get involved? And I think doing that, hopefully quite fun quiz was an easy way of doing it. And there's the media weekend, which is before the championship starts. The players, there's a, by our broadcast building, there's a sort of outside area with all of the camera positions. The players go through and do various interviews that are organised. And if we can grab anyone to do the environment quiz, we'll do it. I don't know whether I don't know what we did a guest quiz in the queue the previous year, which was also on the website, which is really fun. We did the players last year. I'm not quite sure what we're going to come up with this year, but I think to try and make it sort of easy and light and fun, you know, I think one of the things we really do try and do here is show, our aim is to kind of show this in a positive light. Yeah.
Yeah.
All too often the narrative about climate is, you know, well, terms that people don't understand, like net zero, plus doom and gloom. We're doomed. There's nothing we can do. It's all too difficult. And we just want to show, well, there is lots that you can do.
Yeah.
Here we are. We've got two fossil fuel free buildings. Here's all the nature around. There are the solar thermal tubes on the roof of one of the buildings. There are, you know, we know we've got loads more to do. We've not done it yet, but we want to try and sort of promote this positive narrative. So hopefully the quiz was a sort of fun way of doing that.
Yeah. And how did the players respond to being asked? You know, obviously the people, we can see the people who said yes.
Yes.
Did many, without naming names, did many decline to take part?
Oh yeah, there are always people,
Yeah.
their teams will steer them on somewhere else. It might be
Um,
that there's a player who's like, oh, that looks fun, and their team will take them elsewhere. So
yeah.
it really sort of depends who's around on the player lawn at the day
Yeah.
at that time. We at Wimbledon, we would always want to also to have some of the British players as
Yeah.
well. So we will target them. So to Sonny Cartel was absolutely gorgeous and did so well at the championships as well. So if there's more that we can get, Cam Norrie, British number 2, really has, strong environmental credentials himself. So he always supports as well, which is
Yeah.
great. So we'd want to get the Brits in there. As we're Wimbledon. But we got, the ladies champion, Iga Swiatek.
Yeah.
She's quite very thoughtful actually about her environmental credentials.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I thought it was a very interesting part. And as you say,
Yeah.
if you're talking to tennis fans, then they will soak up
Yes.
what elite tennis players say.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I'm thinking of something else for the challenges discussion as well. And
All
I
right.
don't know how to
Well, I
word
had
it.
sort of been talking about some of them,
Yeah.
but I suppose I'd been feeding them to you, which,
Yeah.
things like the sheer numbers
Yes.
attending.
Scale.
But what other challenges do you find that?
Well, I mean, I suppose I'm thinking along the lines of, the challenge of getting the athlete advocates. We and a lot of sports are in the same boat on that, and I'd say that isn't something we've cracked. So very happy to sort of share that, but also having content that our social teams who are, our social media team is absolutely amazing. We have such a huge reach thanks to the brilliant content that they put out. Now, saddens me to say, but it is true, our environment positive quiz does not perform as well as, Carlos Alcaraz doing a clip of Carlos Alcaraz doing an amazing little flick between his legs over the head of the player on the other side of the net. So
Nice.
I would say there's another challenge that we face and that lots of sports organizations face is kind of getting the share of attention when the event is on, and tennis is the main event. So, and I completely get that. And so how do we have content that will perform, that can then we can get out there and reach the audiences that we know we have that opportunity to do with sport. That's why sport is so exciting, because you do have such a huge opportunity to reach people in their living rooms or around the stadiums with these, positive messages, and sort of mobilize action. And again, I think we're all grappling with
Yeah.
how we can do that as effectively as we can.
Yeah. And are there other, technical problems with running a massive tennis
I,
tournament?
I think just the sheer scale of it, 500,000 people coming over 2 weeks. There's the sort of impact of that. Also, one of the things that I always think, with Wimbledon, we happen once a year.
Mm.
So if we've got an idea that we want to try, we can try it, and then you have to wait a whole nother year to refresh it or
Yeah.
change it. If you're what stadiums have maybe a little bit more of an opportunity with, say, matches every few weeks. They've got perhaps an opportunity to try something one time, tweak it a little bit. We got one shot each year.
Yeah. And that, of course, raises the bar, because if you did
Yes,
something that seemed on paper to be sensible and you ended up with massive queues
I
before
know.
to
Yeah.
critical match or something
I mean,
like that, it would
yeah,
be a
there is always the risk of that, but I think you still got to try it, haven't you?
yeah,
And we will sort of test things as much as we can. And you we are quite a cautious organization, and it's quite unusual, with a huge respect to our history. Sometimes we will sometimes be the first to do something, other times we won't. We will really make sure when we do something, we want to do it really well.
yeah.
And something else came into my head, and I've now completely forgotten what it was, Gareth, but it was oh my gosh, in terms of what a real challenge for us is, the changing climate.
Yeah,
It is really impacting sport at all levels now. And I suppose in a way that's helpful, because people can see it's actually real. It's a
yeah,
thing. It's impacting your sport. But it doesn't help if there's real extreme heat and the athletes are suffering. And, so I talk about tennis, but, lots of sports are the same thing. Think about cricketers with all of their, heavy gear
yeah,
on. And depending on what part of the world you are, and then the spectators, maybe, not that comfortable sitting in a hot stadium. We're not an indoor event, we're an outdoor event. And you've got sport at elite level being affected, but you've also got sport at grassroots level being
mm,
affected with, if your pitch is flooded for the eighth time this winter, you're not getting out and playing. And we want sport is such a great thing. We want people to be active and out there and having fun, and and if the changing climate is making it worse, then it's harder to do.
yeah. And I suppose that pushes people towards artificial all-weather pitches
Yeah.
rather than natural
Well, one
grass.
of the
Yeah,
things I do, and I have no kind of real scientific basis for this, but what I do love is, our surface. It's a cooler surface to compete on. I
mm,
would think along with clay, but sometimes, on those concrete, hard tennis courts, I imagine the temperature can, from sort of the radiative heat, the temperature can really get up. So at least on the grass, it's the cooler thermal mass of the
yeah,
grass surface is a bit nicer.
yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the UN framework,
Yeah.
which I can't remember the exact name of. But what does that? How does that work? Does it put requirements on you, or
Yeah.
is it more of sort of system process?
It's both. So it is a collection of it. It's under the UNFCCC, and it's the UN Sport for Climate Action framework. There's also a Sport for Nature framework as well, which we're looking at, and it's the requirements upon us, we have to report our data to them. So there's the UN portal, which has got all of the data for all of the organizations that submit data to the UN. And, there's information on what, do you have an action plan? Do you have a transition plan? What are the emissions? But it's also a kind of, a positive community of like-minded sports events who can learn and share from each other. So, in a way, there are two sides from it. It's address your impact and use your influence. And so really thinking about the spheres of influence of sport
Hmm.
and what we can do. And so you've got everything from, surfing to baseball to tennis to equestrian, big and small. It's a nice really vary and international as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then sort of more nationally, is there a network of tennis sustainability managers on
Um,
other grounds around the country that you can share
well,
some of this
there's,
information?
I mean, there's less tennis sustainability managers, but sport sustainability people.
Yeah.
A lot of us are members of something called BASIS, which is the British Association for Sustainable Sport. And that really helps us to connect with other people who do the same jobs as us. They have webinars, they have a conference, they recognize achievements through an award. It's about kind of helping to drive best practice for the sector. And it also basis advocates for, um, improvements as a sector and policy as well. So and actually I get a lot from that organization, even just a little WhatsApp chat group, basis members group where somebody can put a question on and people will come back with answers. So in terms of tennis, I talk a lot to my counterpart at the LTA, which is the governing body for tennis in the UK. They then engage with tennis clubs, but I also talk to the other Grand Slams. My
Yeah.
sort of opposite number at the other Grand Slams.
Right. Fantastic. And you've mentioned quite a few things you've done, with engagement, with the
Mhm.
venues, with the low carbon buildings or zero carbon buildings. Are there any other wins that you made that you're particularly proud of?
Well, kitchens, so decarbonising the site. So this 35% reduction in gas, we've as you know, well, as I've said, we're the biggest catered event in Europe. We have a lot of kitchens on site which were using gas. There are sort of 42 on-site kitchens. I think 35 of them now are electrified, with the remainder we've done four more this year. There'll be another one next year. Then we've got sort of projects, so they'll almost all be done. So I think, again, that is us really kind of putting our money where our mouth is, and cooking is a big thing here. We've got to feed an awful lot of people during the championships, and it's been really a positive thing that the chefs are happy with, which makes a real difference. We need to have happy chefs cooking delicious food to keep our guests happy, and it's a much nicer environment in the kitchens as well now that they're electric rather than have the gas burning all the time.
Yeah.
So that's good news. I think how we work with our official partners is really a good part of the job. So Evian, for example, introducing the player refills was a really great step forward with sort of two, to us and them. They've been a partner for many years, wanting to work together to address the issue of single-use plastic. So,
Yeah.
so to set up a sort of sterile production facility on site where the Evian bottles are filled and refilled. And then for them to also introduce this into spectators as well. So there's a guest refill
Yeah.
system, which again is a kind of exploring a change to a business model for a big company.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really good thing.
So the 100,000 bottles
Yeah,
saved that was mentioned on
yeah,
the video, is that
yeah.
for just the athletes?
Just the players. Yeah,
So on top of
a lot
that,
of
there's
bottles.
the guests as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
obviously, you don't need to buy water. You can get it for free at the taps. We've got, over 100 taps that you can just fill up with Thames water. But if you want to buy Evian,
Yeah,
you can. But yes, that 100,000 was bottles distributed to players and their teams.
yeah,
And obviously, we've got to hydrate the athletes.
yeah,
So it's an important thing. So that change was really good. And then I just think, that the focus on nature is really a wonderful part of what we do at Wimbledon, and so that the kind of the Irangi. So there's an area in the north of the grounds called Irangi, which is where the practice courts are,
yeah,
where the pavilion is, which is now pavilion. It's a proper building.
yeah,
Pavilion sounds like a teeny little thing with a gorgeous sort of timber roof. It's a proper meaty building with changing rooms and restaurants and things like that, and it's used year round. To have that fossil fuel free, with the solar thermal tubes on the roof, um, and the carbon weightings on the menu, then to have the grass surface, to have the wildflower. There's a gorgeous wildflower bank there, and that's often really features in the behind the scenes footage here at Wimbledon as well. So it's a very nice environment for the players.
yeah,
Plus, it's visible. Here are the players warming up, stretching, practicing on the practice courts, and you've got this lovely backdrop.
yeah.
So
So I was just thinking when you mentioned Thames Water, we should probably
mm,
point out, particularly to our international people, that's the water company, not
yes.
you're not feeding people water straight out of
Water
the
straight
Thames.
out of the river. No, no, very, water from the tap as
Yeah,
well.
but it's interesting what you're saying that the wildflowers then become part of the visual approach
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
so it's sort of tapping into those win-wins.
Yes.
That'd be fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, that's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So I've kept you for some time, but my final question was if you decide to pack this in or move on to another role and you were handing over to a successor, what advice would you give them?
Um, I think, never lose sight of the specialness and the uniqueness of Wimbledon. I think, we always go the extra mile. It is a really special event. I think and this is a sort of learning that I suppose I've had all the way and still never do quite as well as I should. But so much of this is about telling the story. So we've got to communicate what we're doing, where we've come from, where we're going. So tell the story, and you have to do the big things and the small. So, both matter. Unfortunately, I know there's the 80-20 rule, and, never mind the 20%, let's focus on the 80. I agree with that. But actually, sometimes a little thing will capture a spark and will sort of generate a life of its own. So it is make sure that we do the mix and think about, do the people who love Wimbledon, they don't really mind if we've got a net zero target or not, but they do mind that, we it's really visible that we are taking the best care we can of our land holdings and the site, and we're take there are things that they can see and interact with as well. So how it's about bringing it to life. I think you've got to get it right behind the scenes, and we're doing it, a lot behind the scenes, but bring it to life front of house.
Yeah, no, that's a fascinating thing. And I suppose in a way it sort of loops back a little bit to the BBC,
Yeah,
telling stories all the time
yeah,
and the work I know you did on EastEnders and things on sustainability. But it's I suppose like the BBC, you're so publicly facing that
yeah,
I can see absolutely that you want to get the substantial stuff done, but you have to make sure that all the little things that people
yes,
expect, all those
yeah,
boxes are ticked too.
yeah. I mean, we reach, 200 territories.
Yeah,
So if we can just that, there is an enormous opportunity. So if it can be a little bit of it runs through our broadcast feed, if you can see the nature coming across.
yeah,
If our cameras can pan, we've got a camera that goes over the top of the grounds that can see some of the solar infrastructure. We can just bring it to life for the audience.
yes, and the refilled bottles, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Players refilling.
yeah.
It's yeah, it's sort of, and with Wimbledon in a way, it sort of slightly transcends tennis and sport. It is a sort of a thing over and above tennis and sport. So just making being taking these environment positive steps are just a natural part
Yeah.
of Wimbledon.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely one of those people who probably the only tennis I watch every year
Yeah,
is Wimbledon. So,
yeah,
yeah, it is a very, very wide audience, as you say.
yes.
No, that's been fascinating. Thanks, Hattie. So it just leaves me to thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.